what happens when two waves hit each other, that come across each other? So if I have two waves like this, passing through each other, let's assume that each of these fingers represents a pressure, let's say high pressure or high amplitude. And when they meet each other, what happens? Well, there's something called interference. Interference means that you have two waves interacting, and this something called the principle of superposition takes effect. Superposition means if I have two waves meeting each other, then what is actually happening at that spot is just the sum of those two waves. For example, if we're talking about sound, if I have two sound waves hitting each other, when they interfere with each other, well, two types, destructive and constructive. Destructive interference, if two sound waves hit each other, that means that the sound is softer than either of the sound waves before. Sometimes kind of like dead spots. In constructive interference, the sounds combine and it's louder than either of the sounds beforehand. So imagine that each of my fingers here is the crest of a wave. So think back to the other video where I talked about wave representation. So crest of a wave. And so notice at this point right here, I have these two fingers overlapping. That would be a point where there's constructive interference. At this point right here, because remember, between the crests of my waves, I have this point of rarefaction. So this would represent peaks, and then there's a valley down here, and then normal pressure is right here. So at this point right here, it's constructive, destructive, constructive, destructive. And so you'd have these points of loud sound, low sound. This is the beats. Check out the beat video, which talks about this. And I'm going to do another video where I give a little bit better representation than my fingers. But that's the essence. Again, important takeaway from this. Interference, two waves are interacting with each other, and you have constructive interference where the total wave, the combined, is bigger than either of the original waves, and destructive interference where the combined is less than either of the waves. From sound, constructive interference makes it louder, destructive interference softer. Same thing with the light waves. Light waves do the same thing. Light can interfere with itself. When the waves are sort of peaking together, then you get a bright light or brighter light, and when it's doing destructive interference, you get a dark light, and you can actually see this with your hand, at least most people. You've got to notice that there's a small gap here in my hand. Now if I hold this up to my eye like that, I see some light bands and dark bands. I see some dark bands running through it. Now when I was younger, I thought that must have been tiny little hairs or something like that. It's not. That is light interfering with itself. Those dark bands is destructive interference from the electromagnetic waves. The light bands is where you get the constructive interference. Not necessarily, I'd never noticed that it's particularly brighter than it was before, but the dark bands is destructive interference. True. It's a true story. And next video we'll go into more